Hanks. Few words about John before we start. John was born and raised in Chevy Chase, Maryland, went to Blandford prep school, went to Princeton for his undergraduate years, then went on to the University of Rochester for med school. When after that he actually matched in neurosurgery at Duke, but when his first year as an intern, he transferred over to general surgery under the program of Dr. Savison. While he was at Duke, he did research both at the NIH and then spent 2 years working in the lab of Dr. R. Scott Jones, who was his subsequent mentor for the rest of his career. This is John as I knew him at Duke when I first met him, and he really was an outstanding addition to our faculty here. He, Sandy Schenk, and Irv Krohn really formed the nidus of a new energy in the faculty and a rebirth of the department for the next 20 to 30 years after that. John went on to become a professor in just 9 years. He was the head of general surgery for the last 2 decades and was really an outstanding faculty person who was the professor to the residents. He was the go-to surgeon. He demonstrated technical excellence. You know, there weren't fellowships back then. John taught himself how to be an expert in endocrine surgery to the point where he became vice president of the Endocrine Society and a real national figure in endocrine surgery. And when he started out, he was just learned how to do it as it went along. It was just the way we did it back then. He was a funded investigator. He had leadership positions here at UVA. He was head of the clinical staff and guidance head of the OR committee for many years. He was a national surgical leader. He was president of the Southeast Surgical Congress, vice president for the Endocrine Society, and president for the Southern Surgical Association. He was on the board of surgery for a full term and a leader in the country. This is how I remember John in later years. He was a courageous individual who gave a great fight against his final cancer and was just an incredible person, an incredible friend, and a warm and he lit up the room whenever he came into the room. And everybody here, I see Ginny smiling, looks at that picture, and it just reminds us of John. So now I'd like to talk about our speaker today, Dr. Gilbert Upchurch. I had the pleasure actually to introduce Dr. Upchurch for his presidential address at the Southern Surgical a year and a half ago. And so I had a little bit of material to work with pretty easily. So this is Dr. Upchurch when he was here on our faculty between 2010 and 2017 as the head of the Division of Vascular Surgery. And going back to Dr. Upchurch's upbringing, he was born in Reidsville, North Carolina, was raised with his sister, and was an athlete as a youngster in high school, played football, went on to undergraduate at University of North Carolina, and also medical school at UNC. There we go. That's graduating with his sister Gina. Went up to the Brigham to do his residency and fellowship. It was there that he met Nancy, his wife, at the Children's Hospital in Boston. They were married, had their 3 sons at that point, Walker, Joseph, and Rivers. And then after that, moved on to the University of Michigan, where he was an associate. Moved up to professor within about 9 years on the faculty there. Then we recruited him to come here to the University of Virginia in 2010. That's a picture of Megan. She looks just about the same now. I don't think you've aged at all, Megan. or his kid when he first was here. And while he was in Charlottesville, his kids grew up. This is a great picture of them doing family events at STAB and on medical meetings. Here he is with his 3 sons. That was Rivers. It was a Rivers bachelor party in Vegas 2 years ago. All having a pretty good time. And I won't be singing today like I did at the Southern Surgical, but I'm going to just summarize Gibbs' academic accomplishments. Incredible. He has over $25 million in grants. He won the Flance Carl Award, which is a prestigious award for investigation by the American Surgical last year. He has written 18 books, 115 book chapters, over 500 publications, 530, I think, for last count. He's been the president of the Southern Association of Vascular Surgeons, the Southern Society of Council of Vascular Surgery, the Southern Surgical Association, chair of the Vascular Board, director on the Board of Surgery, and he is currently the Edward M. Cullen and Ann Ira Howard's chair of the Department of Surgery at the University of Florida. And this is a picture of him and Nancy. I had the pleasure of having her company last night at dinner. It was great to see them both again. Welcome back to Charlottesville. Gib, the floor is yours.
Over. All right.
There it is.
Great. Well, thanks very much. Thomas Wolfe was a famous North Carolinian who wrote Look Homeward Angel, and his second follow-up book to that was actually You Can't Go Home Again, which I actually don't believe. Last couple of days have been fantastic. Thanks to Alan, Bruce, Dr. Jones. We had an absolutely wonderful dinner last night, and UVA beat Wake Forest 75-70. So not that anybody was checking their phone at the dinner table. This is a little bit of an awkward talk for me because this is a talk about the things that John Hanks loved. Normally, when you go give a talk, you sort of talk about the things that you love, but I love John Hanks, and there are a lot of things I think we could all take from his life, and I'll share some of those with you. They say to start every talk, you should tell a story. And so I know that nobody in this room remembers me as being a storyteller, John. But this is a story I'm going to tell about John Hanks. I don't know how many people in this room know, but he and Philip can tell me whether it was the Hatfields or the McCoys. I'm not exactly sure. It was one of those feuding Kentucky families. I think they had MEN too, and he took care of those families. And one of them, he was about 35 years old. He'd had a left nephrectomy already. He'd had his adrenal taken out. And one of them, I think he was at Hatfield, presented with terrible hypertension and a recurrent pheochromocytoma. And John said, "Hey, Gib, can you mind helping me with this case?" I'm like, "I'd love to. It sounds great." So we opened this patient up. We didn't do it with a robot or with a laparoscope, and we're dissecting things out carefully, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, there's a cut. The vena cava is open. We don't really have very good control. And I look over at Hanks. I just put my fist down in the thing. I clamp. We do have enough control to actually clamp above the kidney. Remember, the right renal only has a single drainage, and Hanks just looks like he's totally panicked. And he goes, "Sponge sticks." And he grabs a sponge stick and he pushes down on the kidney and he pushes down on the inflow from the IBC, and out pops this huge tumor. It looks literally like the size of a tangerine out of the thing. So I lift the tumor up, I cut across it, I whip stitch the opening closed that had been sort of opened in the cava. And I look over at him and I said, "Hanks, I had no idea you were such a good vascular surgeon." The patient did not turn a hair. He went home in like 3 days, despite whatever we had done to him. I don't much know how he did, but I think he was just mean enough to do fine. So nonetheless, when I think about John Hanks, I think about the things that actually, were important to him. You've seen pictures like this. I moved here in 2010 to be the division chief in vascular surgery. John Hanks was division chief of general surgery. And this is a slide I used. This is the only slide that I could actually use. All of the rest of this is new content. I used this slide at Southern Surgical when I was talking about heroes and friends. And John Hanks, I listed as among one of those people with heroes and friends. Now, John Hanks, Bruce just said, went to Princeton, Wisconsin. He has a long-standing family history in Wisconsin and then Duke. Now, oppose that to actually myself, who went to Harvard, Michigan, and UNC. We had absolutely no reason to be friends. I mean, it was just absolutely, and yet we became super close friends. Here we are, a picture at Southern Surgical. And I can say without a doubt, the reason I was president of the Southern Surgical and will be president of the Halstead next year is because of him. Now you think about that. He had absolutely nothing to gain from being kind to me. and he was. And I think that's a really important thing. So I'm going to talk about leadership, family, and baseball. Those are the three things when I think of John Hanks that mean, and leadership is everything. He was the chief of general surgery. We talked about this. He shaped careers, culture, leader in academics. And these are the things he had to balance: clinical excellence, faculty development, resident education, finances, and institutional politics. I know there are none of those that go on here at UVA. But here's the thing. Leadership requires steadiness. John Hanks was steady. So that's one of the things I loved about John. There is this is not a leadership talk. I don't want anybody to sort of fall asleep immediately on me. But Spence Taylor is a vascular surgeon. He started medical school down in South Carolina. If you ever want to talk on leadership, he's the guy. And he wrote this book. He actually started the medical school in South Carolina, brought in a company, and he got fired. So then he went home and he said, what can I learn about this? And he wrote this book called Leadership Genomics. Now, I know well enough, I've given enough grand rounds that you can mention the word gene one time per talk and keep people away. So this is my one time. And he talks a lot about leading like a band leader. And this is what we do in surgery. This I think is the Wisconsin person. It could be the person from Ohio State that dots the I. But John led like a shepherd. He led from behind. He could basically bring people together and actually get them to move in the right direction. So I want to, as we're thinking about this, I want everybody in the audience to think, like most surgeons, are you aware of how you're showing up? What kind of leader are you? And this is this one bad slide, leadership genomics. This is a point I want to, you said I could move around and things would, but this is the point I want you to think about. Are you a gut leader, a head leader, or a heart leader? Because we're all born with our gene pool, and it's only through sort of these translational steps I won't go into that we actually become the leader that we are. This process of evolution, integration, environmental factors, where you are, that pertains how you are as a gut. So reiterating, there's three leadership styles. One, you lead with the gut. Those are purpose mission people. I personally have, and I should have done it here, I purposely read the mission vision statement at every Department of Surgery meeting that we open up. Not grand rounds and M&M, but I have somebody in the audience read it because I think it's important that we focus. It helps you bring focus to what you're doing immediately. You can also lead with your head, analytics, objective results. These are performance-driven people who actually care about dollars and cents. Spence Taylor was a finalist for the president at Clemson University, and the job went to somebody who was a lead with the head person. They needed somebody to raise money. So that the lead with the head people are the money raisers. John Hanks led with the heart. He was about building relationships and building culture. So great leaders understand that purpose creates culture and that culture drives performance. It's super easy. Now, I'm not saying, and this is a cycle. John led like a shepherd. Moral purpose creates culture that drives performance. That's sort of the thing. That's the message about leadership that I want you to remember. All of us have one leadership skill mainly, but we need all three skills. And this is where family and friends come in. Surrounding yourself with really good people, I think, is really critical. Great leaders understand John was a heart guy, at least in my mind. But you also need to keep these other two characteristics around you. And I think this is really, use this example yourself to think about it. Are you a heart, a gut, or an emotion purpose? Are you a purpose, or culture, or performance? As you're sitting in your seat today, what are you? And if you're a culture person, then you need to surround yourself with purpose and performance people. So it's just, I think that's a really important thing. So this is John, one of his daughters. What made John Hanks a great leader? He knew he was a relationship builder. And titles, we all have these fancy titles. They can give you authority, but consistency builds credibility. And John did not lead with volume. He was never the loudest person in the room. Never. But he led with consistency and discipline. So what are those characteristics that made John a good leader? He listened carefully, he spoke deliberately, he avoided reactionary decisions, And most importantly, he protected his team. I think that's a really, really important thing. He understood that departments and surgeons thrive on predictability. And I think everybody in this room performed better because they trusted John Hanks. As a department, I think we need to understand that we need to develop great leaders. In academic departments, I know this place has been going through a lot of change. I've personally had 9 deans in 13 years. Think about that. Academic departments don't transform overnight. Recruitment takes years, cultures take years, reputation takes decades. Use the John Hanks model. If I'm building a department or a division or a college of medicine, invest in people and watch them grow and help them build durability. So this is all I'm going to talk about in terms of leadership. This is my transition slide with some of the many pictures of John Hanks and all the time he spent here at UVA. So let's talk about family next. All right, John knew that stability at home strengthens our ability to lead, and leadership without grounding can run adrift. Now, this next statement that I'm going to put up here is really important. Family corrects that drift and anchors us in our identity, right? When you go home, I know it's hard to believe, but you're no longer the chair of surgery. You are just Scott Jones, and I need you to take out the trash. John, family, at home, here he is with one of his rescued horses. Family wasn't really an accessory. You know, it was really central to what he believed in. And he understood that professional excellence means little without personal integrity. And I think those are some words that I think of John Hanks and the importance of family. So every talk about John Hanks or about a person, and I have to reflect back, there will be a day in the not so distant future that you'll have a John Hanks lecture that won't know John Hanks. And so I would say this is sort of my dedication to John. Here's a picture of John with his mom, a picture with his dad, a picture of John with his 3 brothers. Here he is with his daughters, Laura and Mary, and Bonnie, you've heard a lot about. Now, I thought about this, and I said the Duke Mafia. Here's Sandy and John and Scott and Bruce and Craig Slingloff. I'm sorry, I should have had a picture of Craig in here as well. He was an intern when Bruce was a chief resident. I shouldn't have said Mafia. There are all sorts of unintended, maybe that's the way I think of them, but you don't need to think of them. You should think about them as his Duke family. So I sort of, if I was ever asked to give this talk again, I would basically take the word Mafia off. And here, he and Scott are actually talking, I think, to Ben Brooke, who was maybe a visiting professor or something. But nonetheless, Scott brought John here, and I think, the world at the UVA is better here. John and Bonnie and Jerry and Bruce are probably at a Muller-Jones-Crone meeting. Bruce also was part of the heart and soul of the department. And many of these pictures came from Kristen Dudley, and Facebook. So getting back to family creates, as a surgeon, make us feel every day like everything we do is urgent, emergent. I know there's nobody in this room, but it tends to make us think that we're like the center of the world, right? Family, on the other hand, reminds us that that is not true. And I think being grounded in family allows us to react less emotionally, decide more rationally, protect our teams from unnecessary pressure. And that's really what a parent does for their kids. Tracy was just here, and I've watched her grow up, and the incredible pride that Megan has in her is just so great. John's steady perspective did not appear by accident. It reflected his ability to maintain his balance in his life, and all of life is about balance, to be honest. And I think here he is with his 2 daughters in front of the Washington Monument. I think this was sort of late in John's life. So, in legacies, we talked a little bit about this. Our CV is our list of accomplishments. Bruce read my CV, but maybe it says a little bit about me. What it says about me is that I'm old, and that I've been at this for a long time. But legacy lives in our people. Families remember character, and departments remember culture. I think this is really, our trainees remember how they felt under your leadership. And here are two of his all-time favorites. There are many, many others in the audience, but I know these two in particular had a very fond place in John's heart. And this one also had a very fond place in John's heart. Megan was the first, after only 51 years, we had a female president of the Southern Basket. And I noticed on the first slide, the first person, John Hanks. And I'm so proud of Megan and what she's accomplished. It's like almost my emotions are ready to flow over. The job she did as president of the Southern Vascular was unbelievable, and you should all be very proud of her. And the fact that John Hanks was her primary mentor, as well as a number of other people there. So I think that's really important. John, here's another picture of he and Rob Sawyer and Reed Adams. John's legacy lives not only in programs he built, surgeons he trained, leaders he developed, but also those values that he put forth for us. The most powerful legacy, as I talked about under the leadership idea, is relational. John was a relations person, culture person. That's not to say that he couldn't raise money. That's not to say that he was not a mission vision person. His main superpower was that he was into relations. Okay, baseball. I'm going to be honest, I don't love baseball. Of the three major sports, baseball is too slow for me. I'm more of a football, basketball guy. But here John is. What I found very interesting is he was the assistant coach or manager of the Western Albemarle JV baseball team, talking about like a love for the game. And what was interesting is his daughters didn't actually even go to Western Albemarle. So he didn't have any connection with that. His connection was with another high school here in town. But I thought about John and I thought about baseball, and I tried to make this sort of a connection. Baseball is a cerebral sport. You know, game can end 1-0. It's like the best pitching duel you've ever seen. It's not chaotic or fast. It unfolds deliberately, rewards preparation, and punishes impatience. What does this remind you of? It reminds us a perfect metaphor, baseball, for Dr. Hanks's approach to endocrine surgery and leadership. Slow, steady, and trusting. So I have to, this is my only slide that I put in here. I trained at the Brigham in the 1950s. Up until about the 1950s, surgeons were thought of as barbers, anatomists, and Dr. Jones can speak to this probably better than anybody. This book, Metabolic Care of the Surgical Patient, was written by Francis D. Moore Sr., who was the chair at the Brigham for 39 years. Yeah, that just wouldn't pass HR snuff anymore. But I love this response that he coined the idea that we're actually the metabolic machinery, not just a bunch of anatomic parts being connected, bones, muscles, arteries. Surgery is responsibility, and I think we all here today, we know this. We know that surgery is responsibility. We had discussion around M&M, around end-of-life issues, and this is super important. And John learned at the, sort of the foot of David Savastin. And Dr. Savastin is obviously well-known, Savastin textbook. He learned many lessons from Dr. Savastin, including the joys of academics, which I think are really important. And he, like his wife, like I met my wife, he met his wife at Duke in the operating room. My wife was the child life specialist on the infant toddler ward at 8 West, on 8 West in Boston Children's. We both met our spouses where we were training. And I had so many conversations about Dr. Savastin and operating with Dr. Savastin, and I won't go into most of those, but and because R. Scott and I talked about that, but he is an academician because of Dr. Savastin, Dr. Jones. I think that's really. I want to make one point about Dr. Savastin that most of you will not know. He actually went to UNC Chapel Hill undergrad. So I just want to point that out. I'm just not saying that. So there are people who are occasionally wayward. So this is John. John was in the operating room. This is an important thing. Here he is, probably as he's closing it out. This was his last case for Philip Smith. What operation did you do?
All I remember is with him.
Okay, interesting. So this is John's last case, picture from his last case with Philip, being his first assistant. And we all sort of get, as I get sort of closer to this last case, I'm closer to this last case than first case. Pictures like this sort of, I don't know, made me a little bit choked up, but nonetheless, and as an endocrine surgeon, John believed in precision, planning, and restraint. It wasn't an accident that he was an endocrine surgeon. This is a malignant Theo in honor of my Hatfields and McCoy's story. Endocrine surgery demands detailed anatomic knowledge, physiologic insight, patience, respect for small margins, anticipating variation, and thinking before you act. These are all things as an endocrine surgeon you have to do. This is probably a little bit different than aortic surgery. So baseball and endocrine surgery, John loved he grew up, as Bruce said, in Washington. He loved the Washington Senators, the Nationals. But in baseball, you have to be patient. There's strategy, team play. The batter studies the pitchers. The pitcher studies the batters. The manager's always thinking several steps ahead, just like Anna Pashandi does in the operating room. She's an endocrine surgeon. Mental discipline, calm under pressure. When the vena cava has a hole in it, John just picked up 2 sponge sticks and put pressure down. That's all he did. He literally said, okay, Upchurch, start sewing. Endocrine surgery, many of the same things. Precision planning, millimeters matter. You have to study the imaging ahead of time, anticipate variation, and once again, reward mental discipline, and you have to have that calm under pressure. So John's love of baseball, it's no surprising that he became an endocrine surgeon. Hopefully I've built the strong case that the two are very parallel in their interests. So how does being an endocrine surgeon prepare you to be a good leader? Here's a picture of his daughter and his grandson. You have to anticipate consequences, understand systems, value precision. And I love this last one, avoid unnecessary drama. I just love that. John approached leadership the way he approached surgery. I think that's a really important piece for me. So I used to win teaching awards for starting 10 minutes late and finishing 10 minutes early. So that's going to be true today. Now, I first of all recognize that the Green Bay Packers are not a baseball team, but John also loved the Green Bay Packers. And it would have been a lot easier for me to talk about football, aggression, et cetera, but it didn't really work as a parallel with endocrine surgery. So baseball, long season, oh my God, 162 games. I want to shoot myself. No single game defines, a season. And leadership works that way. In baseball, you can get beat 19-0 by a team and then play them again the next day and win the game 2-1. So it sort of works that way in leadership. One complication, this is really important, is not to find a surgeon. And as a young surgeon, it's really important to realize that your hardest, the vascular fellow was presenting today, the hardest time, you think that during your vascular fellowship or during your chief resident year, that's the hardest it's ever going to be. I've got bad news for you. The hardest is when you first get done and you don't have a schedule. You've gone through like 20 years just marching through things. And the first day you show up, nobody's telling you, oh, go to the OR and do this great case with another attending. No, you got to go to clinic. You got to build your practice. And you're going to have complications, and you just can't let it sort of ruin you. It's important to sort of understand that. Sustained excellence is rewarded by making the playoffs. In baseball, if you go it's almost like being a weatherman. If you go 500 in baseball, you would be the best hitter that ever that ever walked the face of the planet. So here's the thing: be like John Hanks. Be the surgeon everybody wants in the 9th inning. And I know there are a lot of 9th inning surgeons here. I practiced with a bunch of them. I see Leora and John Kern and Peter Hallowell and Megan and Bruce. I could just name the whole department. Be the surgeon everybody wants in the 4th quarter. That's a really critical issue. Just look when I'm looking at the trainings. So my final thoughts about John Hanks. And I know this is sad. Leadership ends, careers ends, and programs evolve, and we're all in the process of that. It is no different at Florida or UNC or anywhere else. All of these things happen. Dr. Jones moves on, Dr. Crone moves on, and all of these things happen. But for your legacy to survive, you have to build people, you have to build a culture, you have to build something that lasts. And if you make all your decisions like that, I think it's really important. John Hanks, in my mind, built something durable because he aligned leadership, family, and a love for a game or a specialty that rewards excellence and patience. Now, I missed John's eulogy that his daughters put on. I would have loved to have gone. And this was the picture that they put. This was the opening of the YouTube video. And, you know, John spent his last years out on a farm, basically taking every stray dog, every stray horse, every stray, you know, donkey or mule in the county. And I saw this picture of John, and I thought it was sort of a fitting end. And I had to come up with something. I could not come up with anything that I wanted to say specifically about John. So I was walking through Washington, D.C., and we are in a really strange time in our country's tenure. We went from the Martin Luther King, I'd never seen we went from the Martin Luther King Memorial over to the FDR Memorial. And it made me think of John. I'd never seen the FDR Memorial. It's sort of out there as you're going across to the Jefferson Memorial. And so people are always like, oh, that's too far to walk. So I had enough time. I know I was missing some of the meeting I was supposed to be at, but I saw this quote and it reminded me of John Hanks. I wanted to share it with you. The test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much. It is whether we provide enough for those who have too little. So as you leave Grand Rounds today, I hope you leave with a sense that your legacy and John Hanks' legacy is really important. We're super blessed to be able to do what we do every day, to take care of the sick. Never take that for granted. I think it's super important. And it's really our goal to provide for those who have too little. So as I said earlier, I'm so thankful to be here. It's really been a blessing. I'm looking forward to meeting with people all day long. And I hope in some small manner, I've sort of encapsulated Dr. Hanks in a 30-minute lecture for you because he was definitely worth knowing. Thanks everybody for coming.
Questions for Dr. Upchurch? Charlie?
Not sure what a comment, but you know, yeah, you're 100% right, and you know, I think you also are a part of that legacy, and also I think have a lot of that same qualities that John. Maybe you're a little bit more of a bull in a china shop, but you've been to me in some ways what John has been to you. Like I have gotten into things that I'm 100% sure are related to what you did, and I appreciate that you kind of looked after me as well. And I hope someday I can, you know, do that for somebody else. But I'm never going to be as accomplished as you, quite frankly. But I do have a story too. You may not remember, but I've only had maybe two people, but one person who I thought might bleed to death on the operating room table, and it was a Saturday, and I was taken out a J pouch, and we got into, well, you know, leaf load of colorectal humor, bleeding, and it was a Saturday, and it was bad, and I thought, this person is going to bleed to death, and I called you, and you came in, and even with your help, he almost bled to death, and we spent time packing and put stitches in, and thank God he stopped bleeding, and I still see him in the hospital periodically. He's got a lot of chronic medical problems. But you came when I asked you to come, and you helped me out of a bad spot. And you've always kind of been there lurking in the background and helping me. So I'm appreciative of you, just like you're appreciative of John. And I think that this, lectureship, if you will, was really great. way to honor John, but also honor you too. Thank you.
We have Zoom, and I think Bonnie and Laura both are on. Can they speak to us?
Hi, thank you so much for inviting us and for giving this great lecture about Dad. When I saw the title of this talk, I was like, wow, that really sums up Dad. I think some of you in the room might know my CV better than I do, honestly, from being around him. He really did love baseball. He also loved one-liners. He loved saying things like, I raised good boys. About a story that I told at his remembrance was when I was deciding to go into med school. I don't know why I was really nervous to tell him. I didn't know if I would be able to do it if I was as smart as he was. And his one-liner was, "I've had plenty of med students that were dumber than you." So the encouragement I needed, I guess. But I think if Dad was here today, he would have just loved this. He would have been a little bit embarrassed, but he would have just loved to be there and hear all this. And I think he would also say, for God's sakes, will someone give Phil Smith a razor?
I'm almost sure he would have said that, probably. Thanks to you and your mom. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate your continued friendship. I will say, the world of surgery is very small. I interviewed your vascular fellow down in Florida, or at some point along the way, maybe it was here. This Kevin Bacon concept that we're all like 7 people, whatever away, is completely not true. You basically could get to whomever in surgery in about two people away. So I think that's a really, really important thing. It is a small world. That's why it's super important to be it's really important to be nice to people on the way up, because you may be passing them on the way down. That's the way I think about it. And I'm sure I'm going to be asking somebody in this room for a job one day when I'm just an old near retirement vascular surgeon. So
thank you. And
really
I think
appreciate it.
my mom wanted to
Go
say
ahead.
something. My mom wanted
Sure,
to say
go ahead.
something. Okay.
I just wanted to thank you, Gib. That was just so thoughtful and so lovely and well put together. And we really appreciate it. And thank you for making it possible for us to see this.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for being there.
Okay, thank you for a really outstanding talk. It was emotional. It was well thought out, intellectual. Oh, Scott, I want you to say something.
It's most beautiful talks I've ever heard about the most beautiful subject. It was beautiful. I mean, I'm sort of smothered in emotion at this moment. You couldn't, you nailed it. But one thing I have to say personally is that working with John Hanks was just a lifetime experience of collaboration that's indescribable. I just think of the things that I or we in this department could never have done, never, ever without his presence. Again and again and again over the entire time, the length and depth and breadth of what he did for everybody else and for me personally and for Bruce, for you, is indescribable. It's indescribable. And all I can do is thank you for really framing this in such a beautiful way.
I think Scott said it all. All right.
Thanks,
you
Bruce.
so much.
Thank you so much.
Token of our-
20 minutes early, so I'm giving you 20 minutes early, Pat. 20 minutes.
All right, last night.